Hi, this is Pete from GS2. Going to do a relatively short video on a project I did, a few years ago. Met a friend of mine, long story short, guitarist, played in various bands over the course of lifetime, and we had met up, and I had mentioned that as I retired, I took on a hobby to build a couple kits, made some amplifiers, home stereo stuff, nothing special. And I found a schematic online for an old Fender 1957 twin amp, and it was just practice. And so it was my first non-kit build. And it turned out okay, plus or minus the fact that because I did point-to-point wiring on it, it looked like a bird's nest, but it worked. And in fact, it was a project I'm going to bring out a little later to show how I modified the heck out of it. So anyway, this friend of mine says, "Hey, do you build from schematic?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure." And of course, this is 3-4 years ago, and I'm still developing my skills. So I assembled the bill of materials, and then retired engineer. So if it's not in an Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't go anywhere. And I bought all the parts, and I put them on my table in my listing room in the basement, and bought a plain small head case for it over here, and bought the chassis, which was uncut. This would be the power transformer, output transformer, and the choke, and then all the miscellaneous, you name it, tubes. There's some 12EX7s here, and so I bought all the little parts for it and put it on the table and took a picture of it, and little did I know that this would turn into a really great learning experience for me. Through a lot of failures, but I guess that's what you do. If you don't make mistakes, you're not trying nothing new. That's what they used to tell me when I was skiing, anyway. So I took the chassis on my bench here, and I had drawn it out in AutoCAD as much as I could, and figured out where I was going to put the 9-pin connectors and the 8-pin connectors for the EL34s, and where I was going to mount the three 50/50 caps that are over there, and where I was going to put my input transformers and holes for the grommets. And it was pretty straightforward stuff, my IEC connectors at. So I started to do the machining work on that, and this is the front view of it. So it's got the 2 rocker switches in here, then it's this preamp, master, treble, mid, bass, and presence, and then this has got the high-low sensitivity, and this is kind of what it looked like as I cut it out. I'm a retired mechanical engineer, so my machining fabrication skills are a heck of a lot better than my electrical design capabilities, so doing this stuff is pretty easy for me, quite frankly. I have a small little mini shop in my work area here, so I can do this stuff fairly quick. And I use hole cutters to put the holes in there, and it's pretty straightforward stuff. I lay it out, and I can cut it in, and it didn't take too long to do that. And this is a partial assembly, where I got all my pots up front here. This was my first attempt at putting the wrong input jack connectors in. So these did not work. I had to learn the hard way through that. Rocker switches, pilot switch. You can see the back ends of the bottom ends, the caps here. My standoffs for where my ST1 board, that's what Marshall calls it anyway. I end up using a black board with turrets on it, and then this is my heater elements, which I do use a lot different today than I did in this particular build. I typically run these heater elements out and keep them close to the ground. Again, this was an early build for me, so I was doing a lot of learning, making mistakes, learning as I went. And I actually, so then this is what the blackboard looked like. I put everything on CAD so I could pull it off. And then this is an interesting little feature here. I actually decided to put a fuse block in for the heater elements, which typically people don't do that. And I looked into it, researched. I thought it was a good idea. It ended up being kind of a waste of time because I couldn't choose a fuse that fit the environment, because there was a big current rush when turning the unit on, so I had to really size it up. Even if I use a slow blow fuse, I could never get this thing to really do the protection, but then come to find out that heater elements rarely short out anyway. When they do, they just go open. So I put this on here again. When I redid this amp board later, I took that off, but in the project it stayed for now. This is what it looks like dressed. I call it dressed, where I put everything on there. If I would have taken this chassis to paint, this is what it would look like. Power transformer, output transformer, choke, and the 3 caps over here, and then 9-pin connectors. And on the back side, I decided to build in, this has got a selector switch for the impedance for your output, and it's got the high tension DC fuse here, the mains fuse, and I use an IEC connector, of course. I put something a little different over here, and this is probably because most of my background is in home stereo. So I have got amps, tube based, of course, I'm a tube guy, sitting in my listening room, and I'll roll tubes in there, and it's a little quick dissertation on what I learned from working with this one particular guy. His first name is Paul. I'm not going to use his last name, Paul K. And I built in the ability to adjust the bias, the circuitry right inside here, so you don't have to try to put a Scout on here and get it so that you, and in order to put a Scout, because the way the frame is, you'll see it later, you got to take this chassis out of the head box and then stick the Scout in here, put the EL34 on top of it, and then make the measurements through a couple DMMs to get your plate voltage and blah blah blah. You do all this stuff, and then you have little on the ST1 board, the Marshall board, you got this small little trim pot there. I think it's, I don't know, a 20K or 50K. I think it's a 20K, 25K pot that you can set your bias. And in home audio, continuing on this little tirade or tangent here, we roll tubes in on a regular basis. I'll try a different pair of KT88s from a different manufacturer, or EL34s from a different manufacturer, to get a different characteristic sound depending upon what I'm interested that day or what speakers I've got hooked up to it. And it's a great game we love to play, and I think we're all proud of ourselves that we do this sort of stuff. Come to find out, guitarists don't do that. So anyway, it was, again, lesson learned. This is the front side of it here. I actually built a little wooden box around it so I could turn it upside down and work on the bottom of it. So it was some hardwood I had laying around from another project doing the trim out of part of my house. This is kind of looks like on the bottom side. This is the front side of it here, and I actually bought the aftermarket replacement front faceplate, so I didn't have to come up with something special. So it was kind of convenient because I could just lay this up on top of the chassis, trace it out there, and I got my perfect locations for all my pots and stuff like that. It was good. It was kind of, I was amazed at all the places you could buy this stuff out there. I had no idea when I first started. So this is now, I got it upside down. I got my ST1 board, or my black board, built. All my pots are in, and this is where I found a good reference for grounding, which I had some problems with this particular amp. I made some mistakes in the wiring of it. Definitely made some mistakes on the input pots that are still, these are the wrong jacks over here. I did change those out later once I learned something new that day. And this is how it started off. And I started to bring wires into it and slowly dress it out and get it to hook in there, and that's kind of what it looked like from the other end. I used these orange drop capacitors in here, my isolation. I did do the actual print called out for carbon film. I used a lot of metal film. It's a habit. I think I prefer those from a sound standpoint, but some people say, oh, it doesn't matter really, And part of what I'm learning, some of these old amps, that's what gave them some of their character. Some of the things that they did with manufacturing, like if you see some of the pictures, they run this wire along and they solder it to the back of all the pots, and that's their ground rung. And I didn't understand what that could do, a negative or positive, right away. I was able to get to read some stuff from a guy named Merlin Blenko, who does a great dissertation. I'll see if I can put his reference materials up a little later. did a great job of explaining how grounding should work and where you can get yourself into troubles, and you can get these little mini loops in there that can cause distortion. And maybe that's how this thing got some of its sound. I'm not that smart to say I can figure that out or tell you which ones or what. This is these are a couple JJ EL34s. These are some JJ 12AX7s down here, drive tubes and power tubes. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. I built the bias circuitry in here. I got put my bias pot in the back here with a screwdriver. It's a really nice, it was a very expensive pot. And I put a couple terminal ends here so I could plug a voltmeter in there. And I think you can't see it here. You'll see another picture. I have a little push button so that I can bring in a 1 ohm resistor, I don't know, 5 watt or something like that for a short period of time, so I can actually read the cathode current. And if it's across a 1 ohm resistor, it's the voltage and the current are the same. So you can actually measure and adjust your bias current and or flow. And again, it comes out looking like a millivoltage, but you know, the conversion is the same. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. He can roll all these different tubes in there. And then this is a little quick thing, as I learned from my friend Paul. Guitarists like JJs and JJs only, so my idea of being able to roll tubes in and out of here was kind of for naught. But that's just something I did on this particular project, and if I build any guitar amps in the future, I probably will not build in the bias circuitry, even though it's really simple to do. So this is what it looked like. Again, I still have my little side mount here, so I could turn it upside down so I could work on the bottom of it. And then this is what it looks like when I actually put it in the case, the head case here. So this is a small one, it's not the large extra long one. This is how it fit. And I put a shield on the bottom of it and put some, you know, connections here so I could, screw connections so I could take it in and out relatively. And this is, I've actually have this thing hooked up to a dummy load here. It's an 8 ohm load resistor. You really can't see it. It's kind of right here in the corner. And I got my voltmeter hooked up there so I can, you know, press this button right here, which cuts in that 1 ohm resistor, and then I can get a reading out of this thing, of course, once it stabilizes, and I can actually set my bias to whatever I want to do. And I'm of the school of thought, I tend to cold bias things a little bit. I don't typically take them right up to what the manufacturers, and I certainly don't hot bias it, although there's a little level there where you get that really, really great sound. And a guy named Uncle Doug did a really good video on that, on biasing. If you ever go out there in YouTube land and search for Uncle Doug biasing, does a really, really great job, again, for a novice builder like myself to understand what that is, how it works, and what effect the bias has on your output sound. And for guitar amps, and of course, you know, you want to avoid obviously red plating these things. So I had heard stories of guitarists, they keep turning it up till it turns red, and then they back it down a quarter of a turn, an eighth of a turn. It's like, okay. But anyway, so I built the circuitry in there, and again, for naught. I didn't, JJ tubes are going to stay in there for the length of this thing's life. So this is me. I had actually hooked it up to, my friend gave me a 4x12 cabinet here so I could plug it into it, and I think I ran it into, I had a couple clips in the computer I could bring out to a little box I made over here so I could actually play something into it to see what sounded. I didn't have a guitar at the time. I actually bought one so I could plug into things, but I'm not a guitarist, never will be. And just to see how it sounded. And this is what it looked like when I was all done from the backside. And put some labels on there so you can see it. And this is a custom build JCM800 series 2204. And this is my name there, GS2, and where I live, I guess. So all that said and done, this is the front view of it, how it turned out on my back. I wanted to make mention of another resource that I've drawn upon. It's a guy by the name of Merlin Blenko. You can see his name down there. I kind of draw into a little bit. These are just a couple of the books that he's got out. He's got a whole bunch of stuff, and one is the first one on the left-hand side there is Designing Power Supplies. The other one is Signing the two preamps for guitar and bass amps. And again, he's got other ones. This is the one in particular, the power supply, I learned quite a bit from. Grounding techniques. Again, on both books, he goes through a lot of really common sense stuff that if you haven't done this all your life, which I haven't, this is a good resource. Again, there's probably plenty more. This just happened to be the one I grabbed these couple books and took a highlighter to them and just went at them. And there's, again, good resource to pick up stuff that, again, if you're a novice builder like myself, good place to go and learn some new stuff.